Hello, my name is Dr. Marcus Weakley. I am the director of the Center for Writing and Rhetoric at Claremont Graduate University. And today I'm going to be talking about source matrices. So why a source matrix? Well, one of the main characteristics of graduate level writing in comparison to undergraduate or other forms is that you have to learn, integrate, and respond to a greater quantity of sources, as well as, in many cases, a greater quality of sources as well. And this is a demanding process. It's more demanding than other sorts of writing that you've probably done up to this point if you're a graduate student. And the expectations of your audience are also higher. So how do you how do you address this situation, right? Well, one solution is a pre-writing tool like a source matrix. I think it can be really helpful to have a mindset shift here and start to conceive of the writing process as beginning when you're reading these sources. So you're reading, you're learning, you're annotating, you're working to understand the material, but you also know at that same time that you're going to have to use that material later on. It might be for an end of term paper, it might be in a literature review, it might be later on in a milestone, maybe a qualifying exam, a thesis, a dissertation, or a presentation, a conference presentation or a journal article. There are many different forms that you might integrate this source later. And so thinking about writing as beginning then, what can you do then while you are reading and leading up to the actual drafting stage to make it not only easier for you, but to improve the quality of that final product. This idea of really beginning with the end in mind can be really helpful when dealing with this situation of having to work with so many more sources than previously probably in your undergraduate work. So the source matrix helps you organize those sources by argumentative or thematic thread, and it helps you also find patterns, connections, and contrasts. And additionally, it works as a living document that you can return to while you're drafting. So a source matrix, in brief, as I mentioned, is a pre-writing tool, and it's a pre-writing tool that is a table, right? So this can be done in Excel or Google Sheets. It can be done in Microsoft Word as well, or Google Docs. And really, it's a table with columns that are, with one column that is a list of your sources, probably some other columns that are go-tos or things like method, date of publication, a lot of source matrices that I've seen also might have, if it was published in a journal or at a conference. But then the remaining columns are themes. They're themes that are occurring in that topic that you're researching, in that subfield that you're looking at. And you set up these themes, and then you fill in the cells for each individual source, for each column that it does apply to that theme. Not every source will address each theme that you choose, but when it does, you fill in that cell with notes in the form that that would be most helpful for you in your final product. So here's an example. It's often easiest to see this visually to kind of understand if this is your first time encountering this idea. Here we have a simplified version of a source matrix in the sense that the far left column is just a list of last names for the sources and the date of publication in parentheses there, and then three themes, three thematic columns. There's no method, right? There's no source of publication, and there's no unique column for year, like I just mentioned. So this is kind of a very straightforward version of it. And of course, you should tailor your source matrix to whatever you find most useful. I like this because it's illustrative in a way of just how you can use it to take really simple notes to find patterns across a subfield of literature. In this case, anxiety in graduate students, right? And looked at from a psychological perspective, right? So this is a psychology student researching anxiety in graduate students. And we've got here, it looks like 9 sources that they've reviewed. And they've determined at some point, I think the ideal here is as early as possible in terms of process, but they've identified 3 themes at some point within anxiety in graduate students in the literature. These 3, as you can see, are multiple roles, relationships, and classroom environment. You'll see that only one source touched on all 3 of these. A number of them touched on 2 of them. And only one source touched on a single of these 3 themes. So, or no, two sources, it looks like, only touched on a single theme. But you can see here that just from how often there are notes in the cells across the 3 themes, that these themes were chosen well. With these 9 sources, the 3 of them do seem to reappear often. And if you do read some of these notes, things like students can be blackballed in departments because those within the department can be very critical. Classroom contests to debate arguments and reading assignments could lead to extreme anxiety. They've chosen here in this case to provide a brief synopsis of the main findings that are relevant to this work that they are doing as the note. For a source matrix, you might have more notes than this in each cell, if that's relevant to you. That's something that happens often if you're using it to prepare for an exam of some sort, like a qualifying exam. But then there are also others where, as we'll look at an example of in a moment, where keywords are used to help you interact with the table even more. Here's another example of a source matrix, and you can see here an example of it being done slightly differently. And really, this one is chosen for our presentation here today because they did take more notes. So I wanted to give kind of an example of what it might look like if you wanted to go a little heavier on the notes in each column. In this case, they've decided to put the themes on the far left instead of at the top, and make alteration of women's roles because of World War II. Sorry, the topic is women in World War II. So alteration of women's roles, hardships and oppositions, and then the theme, the opposition theme, which is World War II did not affect women. And then the authors are across the top. So a different way of organizing it, not necessarily, wrong in any respects. There isn't only one right way to do this, as long as your sources are organized in a way that's easy for you to understand, then it's working. Here you can see the notes are pulled from specific pages in each of the sources, and there are multiple notes in the cells, right? So this is a different way of utilizing a source matrix. It's a bit more thorough than the previous example, and this is the sort of thing that you could return to studying for an exam or writing an end of term paper, and be able to, pull even some of these direct quotes that they've included here, or go to, these ideas that have been paraphrased. You can go back to those direct pages within the sources, find those ideas, or you can even just pull them right from the source matrix because you know that you paraphrased them well initially when you took that note. And so you can see how helpful this can be in cutting down the process of, okay, I've read 50 sources over these last weeks that may or may not feed into a final paper. I'm going to go back. I remember some of them really well. I've annotated all of them or most of them. I'm going to, start to pull from the ones I remember really well, start to review, maybe reread the ones that I don't remember as well, skim over the others and start to work and pull things together and draft a document. In this case, you would be able to return to your source matrix that you've been working on the entire time and review these notes much more quickly, the main ideas of the different sources that you've covered much more quickly, and you can start to be able to piece things together in whatever genre you are expected to write that final product. And here is another example of a source matrix, one that uses keywords, right? And the idea here by using keywords is that you're able to interact with the table and spot patterns across the literature in a way that it's not nearly as easy to do with the previous two examples. You're still able to, of course, but in this case, as you can see, we're up to the 30 source mark. So once you have this amount of sources and you start to look across a table, you can imagine a source matrix of the type of this type on this slide with 4 sources here. Imagine this laid out to 30, right? It's going to be much, much harder to look across all of these sources and to do that drafting integrative work. In this case, as the sources build, you are able to do that work much more easily. Let's take a moment here to interact with this type of source matrix a little bit so you can see what I mean by the sorting. Here is our template at the Center for Writing and Rhetoric, which I'll talk about a bit at the end. And here is that same example that was on that slide. You'll see this is about cybersecurity, and the initial organization of the sources was alphabetical here, right, on the far left side. But besides the title and publication year, all of these other columns, source type, vulnerability management, AI use, and CVSS improvement, all in some form use keywords, right? For source type, we've got journal, conference, book. For vulnerability management, they really just name the type of vulnerability management software that's used, our type of vulnerability management. We've got intelligent management, advanced with AI, cybersecurity threat intelligence, transforming vulnerabilities to context-aware risks. And then for these other two, for AI use, it's really no, or if yes, what type of AI used. And then for CVSS improvement, it's either yes or no. And when yes, again, similar to AI, a description of the yes. So I can go to this column here for vulnerability management, let's say, and I can click on the sort shortcut button here. And all of the different columns are selected. I'm just going to sort it alphabetically from A to Z. Once I do that, it shifts over all the other columns, and I can start to look across these sources much more easily. So I can see, is there some sort of correlation between the advanced vulnerability management with AI modeling and AI? So there should be, all of these should have AI, but some of them don't. I wonder why not. For CVSS improvement, is there any kind of pattern? Is there something going on here? Well, it looks like the majority of these are no, but look, there are some yes up here. If I had a better understanding of this literature, I would be able to do this sort of sorting and look at what's happening when I resort and see if there are any patterns that might be interesting. This might delineate debates within the topic. It might delineate certain groups of researchers that are looking at certain topics in certain ways, that are pursuing certain avenues of research based on certain agreed beliefs, others that are doing it differently. But it can be really helpful here. We've got, again, cybersecurity threat intelligence never uses AI or CVSS. Intelligent management of known vulnerabilities. Again, you can start to, by interacting with the source matrix, understand more about the patterns of your topic. So jumping back to our PowerPoint here, I do want to emphasize that the idea of a source matrix is for it to play one role in a larger system. As one pre-writing tool, I highly recommend that you develop some form of system that works for you, so that from reading to drafting and revising and finalizing, you have a plan that will help you along the way produce your best work by the end, your best research and your best writing. Annotated bibliographies can be really helpful along these lines. Use of what used to be just citation management software and is now very much, note-taking software like Zotero can be really helpful. Evernote is a note-taking software as well. And then other pre-writing tools like outlining. I think finding what works for you with your reading, note-taking, pre-writing, drafting process, developing a system, and then sticking to it so that you are putting in that work week by week, reading, annotating, developing an annotated bib, reading, annotating, developing a source matrix, so that when it does come to outlining, writing, you're going to be able to integrate more sources better. You're going to be able to develop more robust arguments, research questions, more solid methods based off of the question, the thesis, the argument that you're making. I'm going to improve the overall quality of your research because you aren't just trying to pull together what you've learned over the previous months, maybe years. At the end, you've got some sort of system set up to return to those in an easy way to help you with whatever the final piece is. So as I mentioned, we do have a template that's downloadable, as well as a handout that does go over this topic concisely as well. This is under our online resources tab on our website, www.cgu.edu/write. And thank you all so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful.